There are numerous pet reptiles which are advertised as great for beginners, which aren't. In this video, I'm going to go through 5 reptiles that you should never keep as your first pet and explaining why. I'm David, this is Arabella, welcome to DJ Exotics. So there are numerous species available of reptile when you go into a pet shop, and many of these are fairly easy to breed or easy to acquire. But that doesn't always make them a great beginner pet. And some of the ones which are going to be mentioned in this video you might be surprised at hearing about, especially as they're advertised quite a lot as beginner reptiles. The first one of these is actually the bearded dragon. Now, bearded dragons are very personable. They are very likeable. They can make a great statement in a room if you want to have something that's very impressive and show people and want it to become part of the family. They can be very interactive with their owners. They are fantastic in certain ways, but they do have several drawbacks which make them very bad for a beginner. So the first thing is about their feeding habits. These guys can get really grumpy and very addicted to certain foods. So one of the most common things, we get calls about it all the time, is about bearded dragons actually getting addicted to insects and refusing to eat any greens. Now, bearded dragons, when they're youngster, this is absolutely fine. 70% of their diet should be made up of crickets and locusts with some mealworms put in, and then 30% of salad, fruit and things like that. That's great. But the problem is that bearded dragons don't then transition all the time to their adult diet, and as adults it actually needs to be flipped the other way. So 70% of their diet is greens and 30% is actually insects. What tends to happen is that bearded dragons, they tend to refuse the greens because they get addicted to the insects. Now, this is something which they can get really bad at. Now, we had a bearded dragon called Iguana that would actually pick her food bowl up with the greens in it, run behind a decoration when we weren't looking, tip the bowl out so the greens fell behind the decoration so we couldn't see them, run back to where the spot was where the bowl is, put her bowl down and then stand by it, expecting us to give her insects because she'd eaten her greens, because she learned that behaviour, that if she ate her greens she would get insects. Bearded dragons are quite capable of doing. They are very intelligent and they know that you're not going to let them starve, so you'll give them insects. Or if you're going to be very difficult, that they can pretend to actually eat their greens. The other problem with bearded dragons is that they are a larger reptile, and while often people try to keep them in 4 foot, this isn't very suitable. It's actually quite small for them. They do require a 5 foot at a minimum, and this can be quite a large enclosure, especially for a beginner. You really can't get those online very easily. You often going to get maximum of 4 foot, so you're going to have to buy it, especially it's quite a big expense. Their heating requirements are also quite specific, and they do require very good UVB, otherwise they're going to get MBD, which can be life-changing for them. It's not going to lead to a very long, healthy life. Therefore, bearded dragons do have a lot of care requirements which novice reptile keepers aren't going to be able to meet very easily, and that could diminish the life of a bearded dragon. Not only that, but bearded dragons can be notorious for getting into bad moods, can be very demanding. They don't like things changed a lot. And I've spoken to breeders that say that only about 1 in 10 bearded dragons actually turn out to be very friendly. The other ones can be quite mischievous and naughty and grumpy. The next one is chameleons. Now, these are often portrayed as a great pet reptile. I wouldn't say that they're always advertised as a beginner, but you quite often see starter kits which say chameleon, and you do get a lot of people who ask for chameleons as a first pet because they're very recognisable. They are very seen in movies and TV shows as being a great pet, very loyal to their owners, very friendly. And they are a species which certainly have that kind of calm demeanour, but that doesn't mean they make a great pet. In actual fact, chameleons can be one of the worst ones that you can get. They tend not to have a very long lifespan, some only 3 to 5 years. I think a couple may get up to 7. And a lot of people who keep chameleons actually spend a lot more money on the vet bills for their chameleon every single month than they do on the actual reptile itself. It can run into £100, £200 or dollars every single month just keeping their chameleon healthy. Now, one of the reasons for this is that the chameleon is not a very sturdy reptile. It's quite fragile. It requires the right airflow, the right temperature, the right feeding regime, the right feeding material, the right feeding humidity. You know, everything needs to be absolutely right for them. anything that goes wrong, and they will get ill quite quickly. And they've got a very short lifespan as well, which means that you don't know whether it's too old or anything like that. Chameleons can also be wild caught quite often, and if you do get a good breeder, then it's still not the breed, it's how you keep it. General enclosures that you can get online aren't going to cut it. You're going to need very specialist equipment, very specialist care. It's going to be a lot of work. I really won't get a chameleon if you can help it. Right, number 3, again, is going to surprise you, and that's the reticulated python. Now, these are often sold as babies. They look cute, they come in a lot of stunning colours, but what people forget is that these guys can grow big. They are the longest snakes in the world. They can grow to 20 foot, and this is something which people need to remember, that they may be babies now, but they can live for a long, long time. You know, you're talking 40, 50 years, and they will get big, and sometimes they need their own room. It's not a species that you can keep inside a vivarium. You need to get at least an 8-foot vivarium, if not larger, because some of these guys will grow quite large, and they're not easily handleable for one person. They can be quite dangerous. They have a lot of strong weight. Now, most reticulated pythons, giving them their credit, are very friendly, gentle, docile individuals, and they are lovely. But if you've got a bad-tempered one, or you've got one, maybe you've rescued one that hasn't had a great start in life, and it becomes a little bit aggressive, then that is going to cause a problem, because you're going to be on your own or with one other person, and what's going to happen is that reticulated python is going to be hard to handle. As a result, you've got a very large snake which you can't rehome, because it's going to be very hard to find someone who can look after it. But also you're going to struggle to find someone who's going to want to help you take care of it. Now, these guys will also require lots of big food. You know, they can eat pigs. So it's not something that you're going to really want to have around. These snakes really need to be with big enclosures, with people who are really, really experienced. The next one up is one which is causing a lot of problems in places like Florida, and that's the green iguana. Now, iguanas are often the typical reptiles that people think about when they go, oh, what's a reptile? They think of the iguana. And a lot of people used to keep them as pets because they're sold, again, very, very small, it's cute little babies, but they quickly grow. And once fully grown, these guys can be 7 or foot long, which makes them just about the same size as Geraldine Aldomal's boa. And these guys are known to be very, very defensive. A bite from these can hurt. They tend to tail whip. They're not the best to feed. They tend to have a very high nutrient-dense diet. They like to have bananas and things like that. But their defensiveness makes them a real handful. And again, the space they require, they need nearly a room, a small room, just to look after themselves. For heating requirements are quite high. And looking after them, if you're going to get tail whipped every time you go near it, it's not going to be something that you're going to enjoy looking after. And this is part of the problem, is that a lot of people in the Florida area released their iguanas into the wild after they couldn't look after them anymore. And they thrive in Florida. Florida is the perfect environment for them, so they become an invasive species down there, and that is hurting the local wildlife. So again, the green iguana is one which probably people think is a good beginner reptile, but is far from it. Now, the 5th reptile is actually not a species, and it's one which a lot of people may accidentally guess without even realising it, and that is the wild-caught reptile. Now, the reason why I've been holding Arabella for the whole video is because Arabella wasn't wild-caught, she was captive bred, but a lot of Berber skinks or Schneider skinks are actually wild-caught and sold in the hobby as wild-caught individuals, and that causes several problems. Now, number 1, for the person buying the reptile, it can actually bring in parasites into the home. It can bring back illness. You don't know how old it is, so you could be bringing back a very old Berber skink or a very old reptile that might not live for the maximum lifespan. You can have missing toes, you can have nipped tails, you can have scars from injuries from its life in the wild, and that's just normal for the wild. You know, they will have injuries to them and they'll live absolutely fine. But you are also taking out species, individuals from the wild, so you're depleting wild populations. And part of the thing with keeping reptiles is that you're part of an invisible arc, as it were. So if the species was gone, your contributions to the hobby are actually allowing these guys to be continuously bred. So if there is suddenly a population crash in the wild, then what's going to happen is that those species can be repopulated with captive bred individuals that can be reintroduced. And this is happening with species such as beavers in the UK, where they're releasing captive bred beavers back into the wild, and they're now having a positive impact of where they were once, but are reintroducing other species and creating new habitats which are always there. The other problem with wild caught individuals is their temperament is often much worse. These guys can get very temperamental. You're talking about an individual who probably had a very nice life out in the wild, was hiding away from predators all the time, and that kind of behaviour will translate back into the captive environment which it then finds itself. It's not going to know what it is, it's not going to be socialised, and that is why they're really, really bad. And never, so if you're unsure, always ask the seller, whether they're a pet shop, a breeder online or anywhere, whether or not it's a wild caught individual, or if you see the letters WC near it, that means it's wild caught. Now there are several species that you will never find wild caught, including leopard geckos, royal pythons, Kenyan sand boas, corn snakes, crested geckos. These are all species which are readily bred in captivity, and you don't require them to be caught, but there are some species where wild caught individuals are often captured and sold in the pet trade, the Berber skink being a perfect example. So there's our list of the 5 reptiles that you should not keep. Do let us know if you've got any other species that you think should not be kept for beginners. And thank you very much for watching. Please remember to like, share and comment, and subscribe to the channel. Bye for now.